All right, group. Up next on the Second Chance podcast, special episode bringing back good friend of mine, Billy Ferguson, retired um, director of public safety in Franklin County. We've known each other for years. The guy's got 40 years of experience, and he's here. If you go back and you remember, Billy doesn't get invited on unless there's something bad, and we got to fix that, Billy. Um, Billy doesn't get invited on the show on a regular basis unless we're here to talk about something that's going on that has deeply affected our nation. And today we're going to talk about our incident in New Orleans that happened on New Year's Day, which would have been, Billy was explaining to me, it was actually like 3 a.m., so New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. So we're here to talk about that. And we're here to learn from him on his observations as someone who spent many years, in 40 years in public safety, but many years in leadership, and just how these scenes evolve and what is right and just some best practices. And I'm going to pick his brain, and he's definitely going to give us his observations. So Billy, thank you for being back on, man. I wish wish we was here talking about ice cream flavors.
There you go, Jeff. I appreciate it, man, and thank you for having me back on. And you're right. It seems like the only time we talk is right after something bad happens. And I want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with folks in New Orleans and also Las Vegas.
Yeah.
These tragic events happened yesterday. But in looking at those, the New Orleans hit a little bit home because I was just in New Orleans several months ago, and as I was telling you earlier, the street they were on, Bourbon Street, and you could see the Hard Rock Cafe and the CBS there and some of the news footage. I've been in those many times, and just how close it was. It kind of brings it home to you when you walk those streets and been in those establishments. But I think looking at it, the big thing that jumped out at me after I heard about it and started watching some of the news feeds and some of the social media feeds was how that it seemed like it was a perfect storm there for a catastrophic event to occur. And then I'm not wanting to be critical of Louisiana or New Orleans, but there seemed to be some either failure to plan for an event, or failure to do a pre-plan, or maybe it's failure of executing the pre-plan. Maybe there was a plan done, but it wasn't carried out, and that's yet to be determined as information comes out. But speaking from my experience, an event like that, and New Orleans is a tourist destination. It is a hospitality location, and they do a good job at that. I mean, you and I was talking before we went on the air. You've got the New Year's Eve celebration, which is any major city is a large event. But then you've got the Sugar Bowl that is being played right now. Then we've got the Super Bowl coming up. I believe it's February 2nd, which will be about a mile from there. If you're familiar with that area, from Bourbon Street to the Superdome is only about a mile. And then we've got Mardi Gras, which has hundreds of thousands of people there. So I know these folks were not new to large events coming into their area. And I know that they had the resources there to do that. And again, I feel confident that their fire, EMS, emergency management had the knowledge to mitigate this. And the height the world is in today, if you remember, current FBI Director Wray just testified before Congress a couple months ago that he had never known the U.S. to be at a height of expectation of something catastrophic happening as it is now. And I think it just watching some short news conferences that were carried out there. And again, Jeff, I don't mean to be second guessing anybody or really.
Well, really, I think in public safety, that's what we've done. Is we're not second guessing, but we learn from our shortcomings. We learn from our wins. We were not afraid. I think we learned earlier on, and you taught me this. Is I was scared to fail. If I made a mistake, I thought it was going to just be the end of me, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
We learn from those, and we don't always get it right, and we don't plan. But I wanted to echo that. That's not why we're here tonight. We're here just to talk about our observations and your experience, my experience. And so I can't agree with you more, but I think it's okay for us to give our opinion, just like many people have. And I think your opinion is one that is, from your perspective and the roles that you've gotten to play, is very valued in a situation like this.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think one thing that to say with that is that when we're stating that New Orleans is, accustomed to having large events there, I think the other side of that is that sometimes when you do get accustomed to it, you become complacent.
Yeah.
That you've had, we've had 10 events that drew over 100,000 people in the last year, and nothing happened. Do we really need to bring out these bollards and put them up, or put
Yeah.
these wedge barricades up? 10 events, nothing has happened. So, but it's like I've said, and I say in several seminars and classes and talks I give is, you and I as a responder, we've got to be right 100% of the time. When we're out there making a determination on, is this fire going to breach this wall? Is this explosive going to go? We got to be right 100% of the time. If not, somebody gets hurt or killed. The bad guy's only got to be right one time. He can fail bunches of times, and we never going to either hear about it, know about it. But the one time he gets it right, it's in national news. So I think
That's a great way of putting that, dude. I think I've heard you say that before. The bad guys only got to get it right one time. Public safety
absolutely.
professionals got to get it right 100% of the time.
Fire, EMS, police, emergency management, they got to get it right 100% of the time. Like I said, the bad guys only get it right one time. He can fail multitudes of times. So one of the things that kind of jumped out to me, just again, looking at TV, sitting on the couch, is I think the first thing I noticed was as that at the entrance and everything you saw on TV, there you saw this Walgreens and you saw a couple of police cars, and then you saw the video of the truck going down there. Well, their line of defense against the truck going down there was they had a police car that was sitting there. It was actually an SUV, was sitting there parallel on the street, which really it wasn't going to do anything. The only way that was going to help is the bad guy ran right straight into the police car. But he could go down the sidewalk. He could go to either side of the police car, which he did, and go down. Now, if I was going to use the police vehicle, at a minimum, I'd have parked it perpendicular to the road and maybe put 2 or 3 there.
Billy, did you? I'm going to interrupt you right here. Did you see? They've got the things that come out of the. They got the barricades. They had, but they were lower. Did you notice that, or have you heard any more on?
Oh, I did. And they actually had 2 types. They had the bollards that now some of them are like you said. Some of them come up and down into the ground. Beale Street in Memphis, Tennessee, they come up for events and go back down. The ones that are in New Orleans on Bourbon Street actually do not come up and down. They're actually, you mount them in the street and they kind of twist lock in. And then when you need to open the street, there's a row of basically it's 4 at a time, and you move them over to the sidewalk and you put them right there. So that if you're ever walking down the street and you see 4 of these bollards on the sidewalk, that's where they're mounted till they need them, and then move them to the street. And what the news conferences were saying is that back in November, they had some issues with these, and they were upgrading them for the Super Bowl. Now, I would have thought that, let's either done that last year, because Super Bowl is typically 4 or 5 years out when you're planning for it. You don't wait till November, which is 2 months before the Super Bowl is going to be played, or 3 months, and then start doing this work, knowing that it's not going to be finished. The other thing was they had these wedges, which DC has a lot of those. They'll come up like this and can block a vehicle. A lot of military bases have them. Well, down there they had portable ones they could set up, but they had some malfunctions in those, and it wasn't allowing emergency vehicles to come in. It's what the officials were saying down in New Orleans. So I think there was a significant failure of planning there. And I think a quick fix to that, again, this is a major city, so instead of sitting an SUV police car there, you know, let's just give everybody the benefit of the doubt and say the bollards were not in place, which they wasn't, but because they're working on. Why couldn't we have just as easily pulled a utility public works truck up or a dump truck and blocked those streets off? Why couldn't we have pulled a reserve fire engine up there and blocked those streets off? I think something like that could have been easy. Why couldn't we put Jersey barriers down there? I'm in a small town.
So you get it. So all right. So that's where the cop in Jeff comes back. Is like there had to be a heat run, right? The bad guy had to go through there. We had to know that interest existed for just in simple ways. So there's got to be some more video in my world of just thinking like a bad guy. The best police officers, you got to make your brain think like you're a criminal, right? But just knowing that heat run was there, there's got to, in my world, we're going to catch that truck moving through that lane. I probably one or two times testing that area. That goes into there as well. So I think there's some other things that we'll learn about that of how many times, because you know what I mean. Think about it. Me and you riding through there, and you're like, the sweet spot is open, and to be able to make a right turn into the place where the most people are, from that bad guy who's trying to get it right one time, is what's the chances or what's the odds of that? Of just the first time this guy drives through, he finds his hole and he goes through it. I don't. I would think that I would think there'd at least be one more heat run there for him to see that hole being open or to observe that from some other point as well.
Jeff, you bring up a fantastic point. I don't know how much you've seen of the news footage from the Las Vegas, but they've got some great camera views there. And the gentleman that was driving the cyber truck that blew up in front of the Trump properties out there, they've got video of him circling through that exact location just an hour or so before. I mean, actually through the valet park and then pulls back out and goes down the street and then comes back and parks right there. But you're right. This person or some type of accomplice had made several heat runs through there. That wasn't the first time turning down that street. He knew it very well and knew where to go. And I think there was a lot of failure on a lot of parts there that an experienced emergency management officials would have seen from that. And I think that'll come out more. And I think it's already being realized to some extent there that we failed here a little bit. And one of the things that the chief said there is that, and I can't state this verbatim, but it was kind of to the essence is that we had safeguards in place, but our safeguards were defeated. Again, they don't have to be defeated one time. And it says that we knew there was a malfunction, that the New Orleans police chief stated that. And I think that's where, excuse me, Jim, you've got to have those safeguards with redundancy when you've got that many people, especially in today's world, setting up there. I mean, look, if you saw the Sugar Bowl tonight, I mean, there's 4 or 5 levels of security you had to get through to even get there. And I think that's where we had some failures, and there's certainly some learning points there. And I think that will come out. I think that, a year from now, you and I will be sitting in a seminar somewhere, listening to an incident commander was there saying, hey, here's what we did great, and here's what we got to improve on.
We did that on the regular post 9/11. Like yourself, I was a 9/11 responder locally here. And then as everything unfolded, we discussed a lot of that preparedness, and then just even, I simple things like plain English. The reason why we use plain English in emergency communications now, and I've noticed we get away from that, and going back to more terms, is folks like yourself have retired off, and nobody understands. Like, hey, we don't do that because we got to be able to talk to each other. I've heard some folks going back to using 10 codes or police jargon or whatever that doesn't help anybody on different comms. And we fixed all that post 9/11, but it seems like we backslid into just, hey, yeah, that's now that hasn't happened, or we haven't had that happen. So there's no urgency or any reason to keep those old practices around that we developed post 9/11 as well. So as much as we go, if you notice some of those things or habits that we really deployed post 9/11, we've slid away from them as well. So
And that's very true. And I think that again, we tend to I think we tend to train as emergency responders on the latest hot topic that was
yeah,
out there.
yeah,
We
where
had 9/11,
money is.
so we looked at aircraft stuff. We did all the stuff for aircraft. And then, when COVID came about, man, we was all biohazard and all this. Now, the hot topic is vehicles. This one just happened in Germany. Now it's here. And, you had you had the one in New Orleans, you had one in Las Vegas, but there's also one in Honolulu that hasn't been a lot said about. There was which ended up being a total accident. Was a guy setting off some fireworks inside a private residence, ended up hurting some people. I believe it ended up killing maybe 3 and hurting something like 21 there. So now I see the pendulum swinging back to, vehicle-borne explosive devices, or using a vehicle as the attack weapon. And one thing I don't know if you picked up on, Jeff, is the vehicle that was used in New Orleans was an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
So there's very little noise to that vehicle when it was coming down. Those people were getting hit, probably never knew this vehicle was even coming. When you're down there with the revelry going on and the music and the partying, and now you got you can barely hear a Tesla coming down the road when you stand on the sidewalk in a quiet area.
Hey, it's like bicycle. Yeah, you're right, Billy.
And that wasn't by, coincidence. The planning team for the bad guys knew that, and that's why the electric vehicle was utilized. In my professional opinion, was because it was quiet, and could make the attack that quicker. And if the gentleman, and I call him that, if the person driving that pickup truck hadn't struck that crane there on Bourbon Street, no telling what other carnage would have happened there.
Yeah, definitely.
We lost 15 lives. I think 30 some hurt, but it could have been tremendously worse than it was. But again, I'll go back to some of the first points I made. I think that you've got to plan these events, and you cannot get complacent. And there's all kind of tools out there. One of the big ones that the Coast Guard uses is called the planning P. And anybody that's had any kind of instant command, it's out here. So I'd get, if you get a chance, download this planning P off. It helps you on long-term things. Also, we encourage you to take your ICS classes, your NIMS ICS classes. But once you get this, you've got to do this every time. I think we've all sat in classes and they say, practice makes perfect. Well, I don't really buy into that. I think that perfect practice makes you perfect. When you practice, you've got to make sure you're practicing correctly. If you're practicing something that is incorrect the way you practice it, then you can perform incorrectly, because muscle memory is going to snap back and you're going to go back to what you practiced. Well, if you wasn't practicing it correctly, so I like to say practice makes permanent. So if you practice it wrong, when it comes time to perform, you're going to perform wrong. So you got to make sure when you're practicing correctly. And I think that's why you can't wait till 100,000 people shows up to implement your command system. You got to do that when there's only 5 people there. You've got to always be thinking of how that command system follows and what planning we need. I said earlier, that I live in a small town, but we still develop emergency action plans. We still, when we've got to block off streets, we use either concrete jersey walls. We've got some now that's plastic, and we fill them with water. We have Public Works fill them with water, and then afterwards you just drain them out. Is it as good as concrete or steel bollets? Absolutely not. But it's better than a car sitting there parked parallel to the street or nothing at all.
Yeah.
If somebody's there. So I think as this goes on, we're going to see a lot more come out, and I think there was some. Again, I think it's either one of two things. It was a failure to plan or a failure to execute the plan. And I think that's some things that's going to come out, Jeff.
So those those are our two major gaps that we feel like this is
Right.
exposed: failure to plan, or execution of the plan. This is not something. This is New Year's Eve rolling into New Year's Day, rolling into a Sugar Bowl, rolling into a Super Bowl. So we would think like, this is a state. This we brought in the heavy hitters here. This is the planning wise has come, in my opinion, is probably there's a lot of people that's touched this plan as well. We would think, right? Is that kind of in your experience on a situation this large? What would you see if this was going to go in your jurisdiction? If they was going to have a Super Bowl in your jurisdiction, I think we had Confederate Railroad there, which is similar to the Super Bowl. But what would you say would be the level of input from agencies, or at what levels would we see helping with this?
Well, I think what we would do here in our jurisdiction, what I hope would happen is that once this event was announced and was solidified, at that point we would put a planning team. We would develop who our stakeholders would be. Here in our area, that would be, local fire and EMS, local police, local sheriff's department. And we probably did maybe some overkill, but I always utilize these exercises as a planning exercise because, the chance of the president showing up here, we have to have that level of security, was probably very low, but the chance of the governor showing up was fairly well.
Yeah.
So we kind of went through those steps. So we would put a planning team together, and typically we knew who that was. We'd bring in the hospital. We'd bring in Virginia Department of Transportation, Virginia Department of Health, all your local law enforcement agencies. And then we bring in people like the Red Cross. We bring in a couple of the local motels in case we needed rooms. And we bring in one thing that gets left out a lot. We bring in our GIS department.
Yeah.
Our IT department. What's going to happen when everything's electronic now, and you're out there at this event and everything's going well, and all of a sudden your dispatch station goes down? Well, your IT department's who's got to be there, and they got to be plugged into there. So at that point, we bring that team together, and we would kind of just brainstorm on, okay, what could happen here? Now, is it low risk? Is it high risk? Is it low frequency, high frequency? And then we would have the area that this event was, we'd have it plotted out on maps and overheads, and we would look at, where is the chain weakest at? Where's the links to weakest at? Where's our pressure points at? What's going to happen if, this happens over here and we got to evacuate? Well, we can't go over here. Let's go over here. We would have all that put together in a plan, I'd like to say a couple months ahead of time. Now, that plan is always liquid and fluid. We could always be changing that plan. And really, if you think about it, Jeff, is there a real difference between Mardi Gras and the Super Bowl and the Sugar Bowl? We've still got to do the same thing.
Yeah, same thing.
Now, is it bigger, one bigger than the other? Yeah, I could take a high school football game where I live. It's got 5,000 people versus the Super Bowl have 80,000 people in the world event, but I still have to do the same thing. I have to protect my people that are there. I have to have ingress, egress. I got to have security. I've got to have fire and EMS protection. So it's not what I got to have. It's just how much I've got to have. It changes in here. So think that once you get a real good plan together, it's just a matter of implementing that plan and then upscaling it or downscaling it on whatever you need to do for that particular event.
Does the state, like you're in like a state emergency office in the federal side, do they come in and play a role in that as well with you, or is it less resting on the local jurisdiction?
Well, like we said in an earlier podcast, all events and emergencies are local.
Yeah.
Now, in Virginia, they have the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, and each area has a regional manager, and we would call them in on certain events. Major storms that we had, we'd call them in. And I'll tell you another time that we called them in, and we also had some federal level was back in, I believe it was 2020 when the George Floyd incident occurred. We had some BLM activity here in the county, and we actually had a VDM rep sitting in the EOC, and we even had an FBI agent was sitting in the room with us that was acting as liaisons with their agencies if they needed, and they were there. So just reaching out to these people, they're there. They love to come and play. It's just like I used to. In my previous life, you get called out 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody said, "Well, I bet you hated to get out of bed." And I loved it. I wanted to be there, and they feel the same way. They want to be there because that's what we've all got that drive in our DNA, and fire, police, and EMS, and we want to be where the action is. We're hoping it doesn't happen, but we want to be there when it does. So they are out there, and I think you've seen that from your law enforcement side too. Is that if you needed federal assets, it was just a matter of asking, and they were there. But then you've got to plug those into that plan too.
Got to be able to communicate. Got to be able to talk to them. We got to be able to mesh together. We got to be able to bring everyone in. So there's a huge communication lift there when you bring in outside agencies.
Absolutely, and you need to make sure everybody's singing from the same sheet of music, and that's why I think it's good to develop that emergency action plan. And localities nationwide are required to have an emergency action plan or an emergency operations plan, but a lot of folks will develop them and then set them on the shelf, and they don't do it again until it's time to renew it 4 years down the road, and then they get them out, dust them off, and utilize them. So going back to what I said earlier, whether it's 80,000 at this event or 80 at this event, we still need to look at that emergency action plan or emergency operations plan, and let's get it rolling. And that doesn't mean, if we're going to have a high school football game, that we're going to contact the FBI and have them there, but we need to have them on that checklist in case, okay, we've got this high school football game now, an IED goes off there, or a small plane crashes into the stadium. So we need to have those folks on speed dial that we can bring them in. And I think it's important there too is that we've done a handshake and a hello sometime in a controlled environment. I don't want to meet you for the first time at 2 o'clock in the morning when the world's going to crap. I want to already know you on a first name basis, so I can call you and say, hey, I need some help. That you come on, but I think this event could have been a lot of the destruction, a lot of the death and the injuries could have been mitigated with either. It goes back to two things, Jeff: either better planning or better execution of the plan. And I think we're going to see that is after action reports are done.
How do you leaning into that? I got some things I wrote down to ask you as well. Post incident communication. How do you think they're doing? How do you think they're managing that? Is there anything they can do to improve their transparency and communication with the public during this high pressure time?
Well, I think some of the things that was done not so well as far as communication and transparency is there seemed to be mixed messages out there. And now the citizens didn't know what to believe. If you saw the first FBI press release, it said this is not a terrorist event. Then the next one, 2 hours later, said this is a terrorist event and there's 4 to 5 people out here and you need to remain vigilant. And then today it comes back out and goes, oops, we messed up. It's only one person. There's no need. Everybody can go back to Bourbon Street. It was one lone wolf. Now, and I think what happened is I think nobody was doing anything to intentionally mislead anybody, but I think the way the world is with wanting information quick and wanting it everybody having the information at the same time and getting it out there, I think they were giving you the information as best they had it. No. But sometimes it would have made a little clearer understanding to stand back and go, hey, wait a minute now. Here's what happened. We're going to be out here 10 hours from now and giving you something.
Everybody get to a safe space. We're still figuring out what happened. You're right, Billy. The difference between 9/11, I'll go back to that because that was mine. And I wasn't there. I was many cities away. I wasn't on any major scene. I was just a local responder. Camcorder was and news footage was our biggest thing. I remember watching it being in the Good building when the towers fell. And but I watched that on a news feed, and then the footage afterward I had observed on some kind of camcorder or what have you that came to me through mainstream media. The difference now is everybody has got a camera and is recording the incident, recording the foot, recording the flag, recording all the things and putting that out to their social media that's getting picked up like this, ahead of whatever that lady from the FBI or that police chief or whoever can put out.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think they're under such pressure to get information out there that sometimes it's just that it's just a quick guess and hoping you guess right. And I think you bring up a good point there too. I think if you look at the press releases from the Las Vegas incident versus the press releases from FBI, I think there's no comparison. I think the one from Las Vegas was pretty much spot on,
Yeah.
where the one from New Orleans has some things that need to be worked on there. Uh, and not that I think both people think they was doing what was right, but I think the police chief or the sheriff there in Las Vegas he's giving you facts when he's stating them, and he had facts when he was putting them out there where the some of the speakers and powers that be in New Orleans wasn't quite doing that. Again, I don't think it was intentional to mislead anybody. I think it was just we got to get that out there, or we could be accused of not being transparent. And sometimes, saying too much can be just as bad, even worse than not saying enough.
Yeah.
I think that the first press release should have probably never had anything in it about terrorism.
Yeah.
It probably says, "Hey, I mean, to you, really, if you sit back and think about it, Jeff, at that point in that first couple of hours, did it really matter?
Yeah.
I mean, we needed to
Yeah.
treat the injured, get everybody out of there, catch the bad guy,
Everybody's safety. Yeah.
and then figure it out."
Yeah.
You know,
It could be you can label it whatever you want to, but everybody
yeah,
needs to get safety. Everybody needs shelter, get to a safe place, check on each other, all the things. And you're right, which leads into, everybody getting ticked off because it's like it was a SOP to automatically say that it wasn't. I've read some stuff on that where people get, standard operating procedure sometimes is you say this or say that, and we don't want to bring any negative light. And I don't know if that was the case or not. Right? We don't know what that SOP was or what their protocol was, but I'm with you on that. And I think they'll learn that, and whether it's tourism or it's not is health, life, and safety is our number one priority in that case.
absolutely.
Controlling the situation, but we don't know how much time that poor lady, she's like a NASCAR driver after a wreck. She walks in, somebody's got a mic in her face, and so we don't know kind of her leading into her knowledge as well, or what she'd been told walking into the room. But we do know now that probably we wish that would have been handled a little differently, right? So.
Well, and I don't mean to put it all on New Orleans police, because I think, again, I can look at it. I can be just as critical of the federal authorities that were there. I mean, an incident of that magnitude, you said it earlier, with there's cameras everywhere and there's news people. The circus that came to town right there,
Yeah.
with media, and so the FBI, they're sending out an assistant special agent in charge for the New Orleans field office. Well, to me, you ought to have had somebody from higher up the chain of command there. You ought to have had the director of the FBI, at least the assistant director there, in front of that camera making a speech, not, an assistant director who's probably, 15 rungs down the ladder. Nothing reflective on her. I'm sure she got a call and says, "Hey, you better go make a press release here." And she's like, "Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am." And rolls on out. But I think that, that shouldn't have came, you
But her
know.
first, her first time, I don't have to go back and look, and if I have time, I'll go back and look. Like her first time is one of the one of the biggest events that'll happen in our lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Is her first time behind the mics. You go back to preparedness and
Hmm.
preparation, and I'd like to speak in front of people. I tell everybody I want to speak in front of 10,000. Billy, I get nervous in front of 20 or 10. I'm like, I start, man, and it's hard, when those, last time I did a news thing, I was like, I was cool when I got in front of that camera, got hot, and I was like, dang, it's hot in here, y'all. So it's different. And just, again, preparedness and planning and all the things that goes into that too.
But I'm a little bit different there, Jeff. I think that I would rather speak in front of 20,000 than
Yeah,
speak in front of 20. Because when I'm speaking in front of that 20, I know all eyes are on me and they're listening, hanging on to
that's
every
right.
word I'm
That's a
saying.
great point.
Or
Yeah.
with 20,000 out there, 15,000 don't even hear what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
15,000 scrolling on the phone. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
that's it.
point.
I feel more comfortable talking in front of them than I do in front of just a few.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's a great perspective. I'm gonna remember that next time when I start when my face starts getting hot from the lights or something like that. I remember what you just give. It's great advice. Tell me, accountability, which is, something that always comes out, but like, what do you see coming from accountability measures, and what measures should be put in place to evaluate the response to incidents like this, and just ensure that we continue to improve as across departments?
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. And unfortunately, an incident of that magnitude and of where it had occurred at, accountability is something that's pretty impossible to do as far as the general public. Uh, Now, what we could do is make sure that our responders have some type of accountability system in place. But as far as and our restaurants, they're there, the motels, they ought to had some type of, we know who's working and who ain't. But as far as the patrons and the guests, and I heard somewhere that there was 68,000 people that come into town just for the Sugar Bowl. So there's really no way to effectively account for those people in a short instance. Now, if I would have been the instant commander there, and again, this may have happened, I wasn't there, but I'd have immediately wanted, once these people start uh, getting off of Bourbon Street, I'd have wanted to try to corral as many of those folks I could in a
Yeah.
central area somewhere. So maybe at that point, we could have opened the Superdome and says, hey, try to corral these people. Are we going to have thousands fall through the cracks? Yeah, but we're not going to have them all fall through the cracks. So at least we can do some accountability there. Put out messages on media. If you were there, call this or come to here or something. And not only does that give you a chance to account for folks that were there, but also who may have seen something. You hear the thing, uh, see something, say something. Well, things that may not really mean anything to you might mean a lot to me when you
Yeah.
come and tell me, well, I saw this or I did this or this guy, you put it on the responders or law enforcement and let them figure it out from there. But I think as far as accountability, it was almost like you had to be accountable for yourself there for a while. I think that one thing, and I know you're big into this, I think that it will really behoove the New Orleans community to make sure that there's mental health
Yeah.
um, assets for not only those responders that were there, but for those vendors that were working there, those employees, those restaurants and bars and entertainment establishments, and also the general populace that was there. I mean, you and I have talked about this, but I was at a seminar several years ago, and this really stuck with me. And it was saying that my organization I used to work for, we had an EAP program, Employee Assistance Program. Well, that was a great program, but I think as far as from somebody in mine in your line of work, I want to say it was really, I don't want to say worthless, but I don't think it was real helpful because the average person, and this has been proven with some mental health officials, the average citizen of the United States will see 5 traumas in their lifetime.
Yeah.
5 traumas in their lifetime. You and I have saw 5 traumas in one shift.
Yep.
And the other thing is too, in mine and your world, it's not just one event that affected me mentally. It's these little bit of 1,000 events that have affected me.
Yep.
I can see in myself how I'm cold towards some things just because I've been there. I've done that. It was just another day at the office.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that they're going to have, and they're going to have to get help for these folks, but it's got to be the correct help.
They call it a moral injury now, Billy.
Okay.
So PTSD is, you could probably lean into PTSD with all that experience. But for those not softer, it's at level below PTSD, where as a human you've seen something that is more like someone die, or in this a life near death experience like this right here, to where it really it affects you. So there's a term on that now called moral injury. I heard it at Operation 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐞. There was a fellow there that spoke on it. I can't think of his name, but I did an article on it. I'll post that in the link. I wrote an article on it because it spoke to me, because I was like, wait a minute, I'm in between there somewhere, right? I'm in between those two somewhere. I know a lot of people that are as well. So
I've got to remember that comment there, moral injury. Those folks there that may not even have saw the carnage there, but imagine the psychological impact of maybe hearing the screams, or hearing the crash, or hearing the gunfire. The next time they hear a car backfire or somebody drops a pot and pan in the kitchen, they're going to revert back to that incident for a long time, unless they get the proper counseling and mental health. So I think that's another thing that the New Orleans authorities have to look at. I think that's not just, we can't just let these people, just be there without any help.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to send you the article. I heard it from Rob Swan, who's with Phelan Vital Health. He's over on the West Coast, and he was explaining it there. And like I said, it spoke to me. I'll message you over the article, and I'll put that in the show notes so that folks, if they're interested in learning more about this moral injury, like I said, it's they kind of just termed it on something that's or not PTSD, but it's for folks that have dealt with a traumas in their life, or something unexpected like near death, like what we're talking about here, that is playing a role in there. So it allows them to kind of give that a term where they can help folks with that. You're spot on with EAP. And a lot of people struggle with that, and I always struggled with it just from a relation standpoint. And as I've gotten further in life, is folks like yourself and myself is people that I ask people all the time, hey man, if you're struggling with this stuff, reach out for me. I got to do, I realized a lot of my self destruction was from things that was when I was a kid, and some of the dumb stuff I did made me tick because I just didn't quite understand adulting like you may have, and I'm fortunate enough to have lived through all my reckless behaviors, right? So and that was one of my issues when people were like, Jeff, you all think about talking to a counselor? I'm like, ain't nobody can really relate to what I'm dealing with right now. If you can find me someone who's been where I've been at, so I have, and you have as well. So keep that in mind for public safety folks who are listening to this. Billy, myself, is someone that you can lean on to this. And here's what else I was going to ask you about. Policy. So, what do you think you're going to see? We have a lot of policies. Billy, you implemented a lot of policies in your day just because of screw ups. I wrote and helped write a lot of policies because of the things that I did as an employee, and I've probably wrote a couple chapters, but I've also know that other people have contributed to those as well. I'm not the only contributor to making people our bosses' lives miserable at times. But what do you see on that? Like, what policy changes or reforms could help mitigate the risk of such incidents, like in these densely populated areas?
Well, I always, when I was developing policies, is always one is that every policy is written in blood.
Yeah.
Somebody messed up. Now, whether that resulted in an injury or a death or being terminated from employment, there's nobody sitting around tonight somewhere in this great world thinking about writing a policy tomorrow just to write a policy. So they're all somebody did it. Every time you read a policy, I used to see one at the state police used to have how to put gas in your car. Well, I used to always just kind of like joke about that, but somebody somewhere in a state trooper car drove off with the gas nozzle still stuck in the tank, and somebody somewhere done that.
Somebody did it.
And everything you see in a policy like that. But policies are always living documents. And I think that where we're at now with these policies, not only New Orleans, I think this is a good time for any
There you go.
organization, public or
Yep.
private, to sit down and go, all right, we wrote our policies,
Yep.
but we've never, well, maybe we have, maybe we've exercised them. But now it's time to review them and then rewrite them if needed. Because let's look at the shortfalls that, one of the things that I talk a lot about is one of the things in classes I used to teach was, all right, you have a fire drill. We need to have a meeting place outside the house, a meeting place outside the business. Well, I think that that was probably great 30 years ago. But as I think now is, remember that bad guy's only going to be right once.
One time.
So I can remember teaching classes saying, we've got exit drills posted. We've got, all these other signs posted. We need to post something outside that says evacuation area, a meeting point. And I could take you to places within 30 miles of here and show you where outside it says evacuation point. Well, that's a good idea, but what do you think's bad about that? The bad guy knows it now.
Yeah.
So if I want to, I always think about a lot of times now when I drive by my local high school and you see a fire drill and they moved everybody out to the football field. Well, if I was the bad guy, I would just get somebody to pull the fire drill. I wouldn't try to get in the building. I would let them come out to me.
Yep.
And now, you've got that. So you've got to be careful with the policies that bad guys watch you train. Bad guys train too. So I think that what we got to do is look at that. Now, look at our policies. Is evacuating the building, and I'm just using this as an example, is evacuating the building the best thing to do in all instances? Maybe not. Maybe shelter in place is the best thing. Maybe we ought to change our evacuation route every year or every 3 months. One of the things I like to emphasize when I'm out in policy is be careful who you share your policies with, because Jeff, it's really a double-edged sword when you get into talking about this, and I'm running down a rabbit hole a little bit right now. But a lot of these instances with not necessarily terrorism, but with events or incidents that are happening within workplaces and schools or inside jobs.
Yeah.
It's not a total stranger coming there and did this. It's somebody that you sat down and broke bread with.
That's right.
That done that. So a lot of times, again, we can only limit the damage that's been done. But I think with this, that every company out there, whether it be a public entity or private entity, ought to take time in the next few weeks to break out their policies and read over them, communicate them out, encourage their employees to be familiar with them, and seriously consider, take a deep dive into them. And I think they would find that here's some changes need to be made. I know I could do it with my organization's policies. Tonight, I could go in and say, hey, here's some things that I would do differently today.
Well, and let's point out, because this is something that's a good point to point this out. You're passionate about this because you do this for a living. You help companies create emergency action plans. You help them craft this type stuff. Folks, I can tell you, going from public safety, law enforcement into the private sector world, this is totally overlooked. You're listening to it right now. If you're not the owner of the company, if you're an employee, go have the conversation with your leader, your boss. Like, hey, what is our plan on this? And this is what I'll tell you. I'd go back to 9/11 again, but every 9/11, because of just the relevance that it has with me, is at my last W-2 job over at the dealership, I would go through and test all of our systems. I would work on make sure our fire extinguisher is good. Every year on 9/11, I would go through the building, go over all of our emergency. They've taken that little bit of foundation that I've laid, and they have amplified it light years through muster points and things and changing things up. But we did that, and we're talking about a dealership. We're not, but it was a big deal for me because I was the one that had seen the folks that didn't have that emergency action plan.
Mm-hmm.
If you have no clue, if you're like Jeff, Billy, yeah, it sounds all cool. I don't know. You can reach out for Billy. We'll make sure his contact information is in here. You can reach out for him. He can help guide you on this, whether you're in the state of Virginia, whether you're anywhere in the United States. Billy can help guide you on what it takes to help your company craft this plan and make sure that we evaluate it, put some things in place to help you with that. So I wanted to plug you for that, Billy, because a lot of folks, it's easy, like we always joke, like me and you can talk about public safety, fire department, turn siren, all the stuff. But a lot of people don't understand where all that, like, why do we pay him to ride around the ambulance and sleep in the firehouse all the time? They don't understand all this back end planning that's going on and all the stuff that we talk about, and then how it applies over to them. And you can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not just, I don't want to speak just to fire and EMS agencies or first responder agencies, because a lot of this, it goes back to earlier when I was talking about pre-planning for events. The same thing works, Jeff, in private industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same thing that we were talking to, the Richmond City Fire Department on. We could go over here tomorrow and plug it in at IBM or Ford Motor Company. We just change the names of the players. It needs to be there, and certainly I appreciate the plug. That's the career I'm in right now is working with entities on developing emergency operations plan along with other education consultants. So, I would appreciate putting my information there. And,
definitely.
If we want to talk, just give me a call. I don't charge you to talk, and we can go from there. But we do a lot of that stuff. And again, I think that's the ground. That's the foundation of everything, is having that plan there. But that plan is useless unless you've communicated out and we're executing it when it happens. I don't recall the gentleman. If you'll think about, it's probably been 30 years ago now. There was a plane crash up in a field in Sioux City, Iowa, and they interviewed the pilot and asked him how he had a successful outcome, because this plane crashed, and I want to say it was like 100 people on it, and I don't think it killed like maybe 10 or 12, and everybody else lived. And they asked him about what he had to do to do that, because this plane had lost all its hydraulics on it. It was going to crash land, and it did cartwheels through a cornfield and all this. And he said there were several things that had to take place for a successful outcome. Is one, you had to have a plan. You had to have a plan for everything that you could think of could happen on that aircraft. And you had a plan. And you had to practice that plan. You couldn't wait till the crap hit the fan. And then you had to communicate that plan out. Everybody had to know the plan. And the next thing is the fourth thing you had to have is when crap hit the fan, you had to be able to execute that plan. Now we can control all four of those: the planning, the plan, the communicating, and the execution. The one thing that he said you had to have just a little bit of that we can't control, and that's you always got to have a little bit of luck on your side.
Yeah.
So those are the five things that he was saying. If you're successful in those five things, or if you can execute all those five things, that you're gonna have a successful outcome on about anything. And I think that's a good takeaway point on anything you do is when you're doing that plan. Okay, we got to develop it, we got to practice it, we got to communicate it, and then when it comes time, we got to execute it, and then we got to have just a pinch of luck thrown in there to successfully carry it off. So I think that's a good. I hope there's somebody out here in this world right now that just wrote those notes down right there.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, I'll put them. I'll make sure that we put that in our notes, and I'll credit. Make sure we put that in our show notes. That's really great advice. What did we miss, Billy? We're coming up on an hour. Anything else you had on your notes you wanted to?
I think I just my notes. I'd encourage everybody to go on the internet and search some of this Las Vegas and New Orleans type stuff, and just sit back with an open mind and just think about, if you'd have been the one in New Orleans or Las Vegas getting that call, how would your city or how would your business have handled it differently? I think right now, a lot of times you see a lot of private industry do a lot better job at some of this than we do. And I think there's reasons for that. One is it's private industry. They probably have a lot more resources and assets that we may have. And a lot of your major industries now hire folks that from a law enforcement background, whether it be federal, state, or local, to come in and review this stuff and help them with it. And I think that's some stuff that you and I could help some folks with. But no, I think we did well tonight, and I think we put out a lot of good points. I hope sometime we get our program so we can do like a question and answer session where, I think earlier you talked about that. Maybe people could type in questions or something, and we could answer them.
Next, all right, you got me to do it. I told you I was working on my space a little bit. I just need to record from my laptop, and we can go live.
Right.
So next time, positive or negative, Billy. Let's try to find some positive to talk about one day. But the next time me and you do this, I'm committed. I will. It'll be. It may not be my first live because I've been working on it. Hopefully nothing bad happens between now and then. Hopefully you and I won't talk about anything major going on in our world. For a few weeks, other than some positive news. But if we have to, our next event will stream live on YouTube, and we can stream it on Facebook, Instagram. I think. It's a matter of me. I got it all set up here where it flows. I just need to change my layout, my setup. That's all. Jeff being a little lazy. Need to do a little better job on stuff like this.
Oh man, you're creative with all that stuff. I know you are. And I tell you what, let's make a plan tonight while we got everybody watching. Is that we need to get back on this and do a recap once a hot wash is done on the New Orleans incident. Now, they should do a hot wash in a couple of weeks after it.
Yeah.
After action report might come a year afterwards, but let's do this hot wash and let's see how many points we brought out tonight that they bring out. And I think you can be surprised of some of the same things we talked about will come out in their review.
Well, you are absolutely welcome to talk with me anytime. I appreciate it. You've been a great friend to me over the years, a great mentor, and I continue to learn from you. I'm going to start thinking that 20 people's 20,000, and that 15,000 of them are scrolling on the phones and ain't paying me no attention. That'll get my jitters out of the way when I'm doing my thing. But I can't thank you enough. I hope this helps. I hope Billy and I enjoy this. We enjoy these. We try to bring you a different side of what you're scrolling and seeing because we both kind of experienced it. Not trying to throw shade at nobody. We're just telling you from our experience on what we've seen. And I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. I'll get everything done, and I'll have this thing up here in just a few minutes.
All right, Jeff. Thank you, man.
All right, brother. Appreciate you, Billy.
Yes, sir. Good night.